Kevin, welcome to the show. I'm so honored to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Beautiful. And I'm a big fan of your podcast, Kevin. You share such amazing information, both on social media and also your podcast, The Revolution. And so I know that you're deep and into this work, but you're also walking the talk and you're also embodying all of the knowledge and things that you come across. And that is something that I really appreciate and see in people, in leaders in the world that are making massive impact. So thank you for what you do, firstly.
Receiving that. Grateful. Thank you for seeing it.
Absolutely. And before we go into the episode today, I want to just calm everyone's ears for a moment that are going to have to deal with my scratchy voice that's got happening today. I was just mentioning to you, Kevin, about the smoke that's going on in Australia.
Yeah.
It's heavy and it's a lot for a lot of people, and a lot of people are struggling, and my heart goes out to the people that are actually really struggling. And my voice is part of the just copying a lot of grief right now. So it's really interesting time that we're in, I think, with the world screaming. And it's really interesting that we're going to go into a topic today around the feminine and the masculine. Do you have any thoughts on that, by the way, around what the planet's kind of doing?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I don't go politically either way. I don't think it's a political issue. It's the evolutionary issue. And that is the Earth's undergone massive climatic changes before, and it almost always accompanied a massive speciation, right? So like animals and plants have to figure out the new way, right? And I think humans and humanity, we're at a big evolutionary crossroads where we kind of have to graduate out of the childhood of the species. And I think the planet is inviting us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very loud right now. I'm excited to talk about a topic that I see you share a lot around. And whilst everyone's kind of deep in the masculine and feminine, if they've been a part of this season with me, is something around what masculine presence, and we can talk about what that looks like, but what masculine presence can evoke in a feminine being and why it's so important. So firstly, let's talk about what the masculine presence looks like. And is this gender specific as well?
Yeah, so I mean, with all the masculine feminine dynamics, I think it's important to, really offer a challenge or an invitation, less than like me like teaching or explaining something. It's really, the invitation is for anyone listening to this to, locate yourself in the conversation. Like it's actually, I believe the listener or the viewer's responsibility for a lot of this stuff to really locate yourself in it, because it's not gender specific. It's not genital specific. These are energetics that exist in all beings, I believe, and especially in humans, right? The masculine, the feminine, the yang and the yin, whatever you want to call it. And, it's funny because this question comes up a lot. And, for same-sex couples or trans individuals, they often like feel like they're left out of the conversation, but I think it's quite the opposite. It's also useful for those people to understand themselves, because it all comes back to an inner game. And so when you say masculine presence, if you talk about the core of what is the masculine, and then if you want to take it to men, what is masculinity? It's a quality or a sense of pure awareness and pure presence. And this is what, men have ancestrally always been the best at, and why the male culture has evolved the way it has, all good and all bad, hunting, solving problems, creating structures, both mental and physical, being in leadership, being in, a sense of, if you're very, very, very present, you can react to the environment and the outer world in a skillful way, right? And I'm not saying that all the things I'm talking about have only been men, because obviously women do that as well. But the essence of the masculine, whether it's operating in a male or female body, is presence.
What do you think good presence looks like, or really well cultivated presence looks like or feels like?
More, it feels like you're being seen and you're being if you're in a presence of male presence, you feel at ease, you feel relaxed, because the presence creates a field, right? And so there's ways to establish this: eye contact, tone of voice, skillful language, physical contact, storytelling. There's all these different ways that are, we know and see as a masculine presence. And I would even say, it's a bit more subtle, but anytime you're going to a performance or a movie theater, let's say, or any kind of theater, that's a perfect balance of masculine and feminine, right? There's all this expression and art and flow and chaos, but the masculine presence is you're in a seat in an experience, right? You're being held in that.
Mm.
So that's like kind of a good metaphor, I think, because yeah, anyone we would consider very masculine has this kind of presence, right? For good or ill. And there's nuance, so many nuances to this conversation. Obviously, I'm talking somewhat philosophically, but in action, right? There's different value judgments you can make, right? Because even someone who's, a criminal, let's say, or like a corrupt politician, they have a lot of presence. That's why they've accumulated the power and have the ability to do the things they're doing. So I think that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, for sure. So how does somebody cultivate presence then? Like, how do you become someone who has a beautiful presence about them in their masculine self, if that's something that someone wants to work on?
Yeah, the first word that comes up is discipline. So it's discipline yourself, train, whatever that looks like. It's not just going to the gym or meditating, it's self-knowledge. So a man or a masculine force that has a lot of presence has a lot of self-knowledge, because they're not reacting and leaking energy. They're holding their energy, and they're just being present to what is, and they're being in awareness. And they're not like moving off their center. And the only way you to know what your center is, A, and B, know how to stay in it, would be some form of discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how does this apply to relationship then, if we're entering into polarity, right? So we want a relationship with polarity where there's masculine and feminine there. What is the benefit of the masculine being, who is more dominant and is masculine in this relationship, being really good at being present with their partner?
Yeah, I mean, the masculine presence in a relationship, let's say in the man, and I'm just going to refer to man and woman again, invitation for listeners to locate yourself in this dynamic. If the man's really, really present, the female can surrender and relax and come into expression. And then there's this beautiful dance that happens, because then the man becomes more present because he is stimulated by the feminine and her expression and her kind of juiciness, right? In the primordial energies, right? And a lot of this, I should say, is informed by like Taoism and on some level the tantric tradition in that, and in the Vedic or the Indian tantric lineage. And they just have great terms for this stuff, but you can find out about it for yourself in your own body. Yeah, when the masculine is stimulated by the feminine, he can become more present. He can feel more confident. He can be more of a leader. He can be more grounded in his body, right? And in his mind, which is really good for structuring things. Whereas the female can stay in her heart or her womb and become more expressive, more juicy, right? It's that really sensual energy. And when those are in balance and harmony, you have a beautiful, like, magnetic field that forms. And this is very erotic, but it's not just about sex. It's very life-giving. Like, other people are healed in its presence. Animals, children. There's like a natural magnetic energy that forms, and that's what we see in all healthy relationships. That is so attractive, right?
I like, from my experience as well, and also from what I hear other friends and feminine beings, so typically women say, is that they crave presence in their partner, or they're looking for someone with deep presence. What are like, why do we like, what are we really looking for? Do you know?
I mean, I mean, it's hard to say as a man, but in my experience, it's been women want to relax and be in their feminine nature. And what we have on the modern scale right now, especially in the West, but it's really everywhere, is a lot of men are emasculated and then they're feminine. So they're kind of chaotic, distracted, they're misled. And a lot of women have been forced into their masculine pole. So they're like trying to be the breadwinners, a lot of single mothers, right? And a couple generations now that has created this pattern. And then culture reinforces it. A lot of the negative culture, the toxic culture that, you know, the mainstream sends to us is just reinforcing these gender roles, or it's not even about gender, but these, you know, masculine, feminine archetypes and their arrangement that doesn't actually serve anyone. So when a woman is saying, I want a partner that's present, it's a partner that's going to offer love and creativity and physical touch or whatever love language they're desiring, and someone who can be present to receive them, right?
Mm.
Because if they're not, if a man's not present, there's no way he can receive the energy of the feminine. You know, it's just going to kind of miss, and then, you know, somebody's got to become the masculine pole and come into full presence for there to be the polarity.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I would say like it's like wanting to relax is also feeling safe to relax is a big thing, I think, as well. And I think when there is a masculine presence that you can feel safe with, they they often offer a deep presence about them. And even like in not even in relationships, but in different scenarios, like I'll use my housemate for example. He doesn't listen to this podcast, so it'll be fine. It's
Oh.
he often is subconsciously not knowing he's doing this, but he'll offer like a really strong presence about the way that he's just either sitting there or you know, being in the same room as me, allowing me to feel safe to go into the feminine, you know, to let go of the control for the day, to go into my tantrum or to go into my emotion or go into my expression, and without saying a word or even sometimes like communicating with me, like he'll just hold this kind of space, like he'll just hold the space for me to just like be the thing. And sometimes it's just through eye contact and I get it. I'm like, okay, yeah, pull your shit together, Sam, like move on. Like, and he just allows me to express. He has this space that he just doesn't even know that he holds, just because he's just like, he's in his body, he's grounded, he's slow, he's just like there's no rush, it's just like just there, like that's it. And you have this feeling as a woman to feel safe to just like like I can just be in my heart for a second, and someone's just there to receive that, whether they know that or not. And I think that's a really important element for me that I've noticed over the years, is that if I don't feel safe that they're going to hold that, or they're going to be there, or they're going to be able to withstand that, then I'll keep it all together. Like, you know, I'll cage, I'll guard, I'll put the armor up. And I think that's really been a really important key that I've noticed that I need for me to relax, is to feel that sense of safety.
Right. And that's a brilliant example. It doesn't have to be anything like elaborate or grandiose. It can be just simple presence, like literally silent presence, like you said, just the eye contact, just like the field that's created. And this is very primal, right? This goes back to living in tribes and villages, whether we were hunter-gatherer or agricultural, or living now in cities. You know, somebody has to be the present one in the field, and it traditionally was these masculine leaders. um, and there's feminine leaders that provide this too, but those feminine female bodied leaders are probably in their masculine energy because they're offering that presence, right? And so this is really important for everybody to relax, even other men, right? And sometimes that leadership will change, and I think that's really useful, right? There might be a time where your housemate, for example, it's probably far less than 50% of the time, needs your presence, however small, to kind of like reorient himself. And so that's kind of the beauty of this energy, is it will move and emerge in different people at different times.
Yeah, definitely feel that. So on the flip side then, on the flip side of what I hear is that I just want my partner, who is a woman, I just want my partner to surrender. I want her to surrender more in sex. I want her to like stop being so controlling and surrender. What's happening on that side? So what is the, let's say man, woman, what is the man wanting in the woman, and how can he evoke that how can he evoke that in a woman?
Yeah, this is a big one. I mean, the easiest way is to cultivate presence, but you
Yeah.
know, how do you cultivate presence? Well, again, as I mentioned, some form of training, discipline, and dedication to something. Like, if as a man, if you're aimless, if you don't have something you're shooting at, like you don't have a target, you don't have a mission, you don't have a purpose, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be something huge. Whether you're running your own business or you're a gardener, like you have a purpose. The more you can align to that and get really clear on that, and then get charged up by that, like the enthusiastic power up from knowing that you're offering meaning to the world, you're offering service, you're making a contribution, you're increasing your skill level. So there's something, you're not in anxiety where you're getting crushed by life, right? Because you're just like can't pay the bills, or your body is wrecked, your health's low. But you're also not bored. So you're not kind of this gray, depressed matter as a man, where you're just kind of like, well, I'm just kind of giving up on bettering myself. You got to be in that sweet spot, which I call the zone or the flow state, whatever you want to call it, of really peak presence, peak creativity, peak libido. And I mean libido in like the Freudian sense of life force energy, right? Obviously translates to the bedroom, but, and your bank account, I should say, they're linked. So there's this sense that like a man that's doing that is going to have a lot of presence, and your female is going to surrender and submit to that in a healthy way. And if she's not, it's like, you got to address it. And, you can do this with language or your physical presence. Address it directly. You got to confront it. I think a lot of men now that are doing it, saw their fathers do this, just kind of avoid the feminine anxiety or the feminine storm, right? The emotional energy, the sense of not being surrendered, because they're afraid. And they're afraid of it in her because they're afraid of it in themselves, and they haven't addressed it, right? And so this is where it's important for men to actually do the inner game. It's all the inner work.
Yeah, big fan of that. What do you mean by addressing it though? Like how would you go about addressing that in a woman?
Just really inviting presence to it. So just asking, is there something bothering you? What's wrong? Like, do you want to share about what your inner world is like right now? What are you feeling? You want to go on a walk and just share a little bit, just start to open it up, and you might find out like, oh wow, there's desires, wants, and needs. So as a masculine, one way to be present as a man is to facilitate the conversation. What do you really need right now? How can I support you? What are you desiring right now? Like, what is happening? And it's probably not what you thought it was as a man. Like the logic, rational side can overthink and overcomplicate this. It might be something very, very simple that is just being missed. It might be alone time, or it might be needing to move the body. It might be food. It might be massage. It might be sex. It might be a difficult conversation. Somebody's withholding truth, not even intentionally. It's just happening. And so there's all these ways that you can pop that energy, and then she'll surrender. And then boom, you can come back into the polarity. But yeah, it's like a leadership thing. And in a good relationship, this leadership switches, right?
Yeah.
To whoever has the most awareness. So if you have the most awareness and you're a man in that moment, your job is to address it. If you don't address it and go straight for it by asking questions, by being physically present, by being physically affectionate, it's not going to shift. It's actually going to go deeper into the subconscious and probably come up later in a way that won't be as pleasant.
That's really interesting. I also want to play on this because I heard John Weiland talk about this recently around the job of the masculine isn't to allow the feminine to express her storm so much so that it becomes abuse, because it's coming from a closed heart, and you're just like feeling like this information that's out there a lot right now is like saying you have to just handle the woman, like you just have to handle her storm and all of her emotions. But he was like doing a really good distinguish between what's an open heart and a closed heart in that moment. And if she's expressing and it's becoming abusive because she's in a closed heart and it's like spitting fire and blah blah blah, your job in that is to actually playfully and artfully pull her up and get her back into her heart and express from there, and not allow her just to bang on your chest or or just to he said it's like it's abuse. So as a man, I'd be really interested to know how you kind of pick up these things, like how you know when the right time is to artfully and playfully go, like come back to your heart or whatever you do. how do you read that? Like, how does a man know how to really hold space well for the woman and her emotions?
Yeah, this is a big one, and it definitely is an art that is ongoing. And I'm definitely no expert at this, but having put in a lot of hours, humor is huge, like the artful and playful nature, humor and physical touch. But it's all about timing, right? So
Yeah.
if the storm is in its peak and it's getting really intense, and you haven't addressed the real issues, and you try to go for humor or touch, it might make it worse. So as a man, again, presence, masculine presence is going to tell you when that's happening. And how do you know? Well, it's different for everyone. For me, I feel it in my body. Like I can physically feel it in my gut, I can feel it in my heart. I feel like sensation wise, which I think is instinct and intuition, something's happening. And I can feel like, ooh, I'm contracted right now. I don't feel her heart. I don't feel her real nature. This feels like wounds. Maybe it's inner child. Maybe it's stories and concepts. Maybe she's stuck in her head. And then my job is to get through the resistance myself that I'm feeling. Maybe I'm feeling shame, blame, guilt, feeling like the opposition. Can I overcome that and say the right thing, do the right thing in that moment to invite her into her heart? And you can't do that if you're not in your heart, right?
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like you have to, as a man, really sacrifice your ego and your like part of you that just wants to problem solve and fix it from up here, and come down, down, down into your heart, into your sex center, into your feet, into your relaxedness. And yeah, it's all about timing. Timing is the magic thing there, and it's going to be different for every relationship, obviously.
Yeah, because I know as a woman that's had a lot of storms, um, there's been moments where you want them to say nothing, but just be there. And even though we might say, like, go away, like, get out of my face, like,
Right.
it's actually the thing that we probably don't want, It's like, actually, now you're not hearing me or you don't care enough or whatever. And so I get that it's like a funny place for men because they're like, I don't know what to do in a situation. But I think it's about that. I think it's about they're not really actually hearing because they're in their head trying to go, how do I fix this, or how do I make this better, or how do I get away from the situation, as opposed to feeling fully what is needed in the moment, like what is needed in the space of the moment. Because I've noticed a lot recently, like men are very intuitive, like men know often more than what we need in the moment, and like, and being able to tap into that and trusting that and then offering that is such a gift for a woman.
Huge. Yeah. And I think men have been betrayed by culture because they haven't been taught to be in their intuition, trust their instincts. A lot of it's been this very like result, problem oriented, solution based mental game that will not work in relationships. And that's why the divorce rate is so high and there are so many broken homes. It's like nobody taught us, because no one taught them how to be in relationship and actually relate in this way. And I think one of the biggest things is, yeah, this sense of, oh, women are just crazy, just suck it up, deal with it. And then men, it's like, oh, I'm just logical, just like rational. And it's like that hasn't worked. So there's this art and this skill that is navigating the storm, navigating the heart. And like you said, sometimes nothing needs to be said. Eye contact, soul gazing is a huge tool,
Yeah.
you know, humor, nature, like being playful, like coming into the positive inner child with a partner is a really powerful medicine too.
Hmm. Yeah. What is your like, I often hear as well, like, I wish I could understand women's emotions. I wish I could understand women. And I think it's referring to how to handle the emotion, right? Because um I've been able to witness and see and observe and be part of, um, I don't want to have that conversation with her because what happens if she cries, or and then she needs to, and then I feel like I can't express my truth, so I'll let her get her way. And it's like, how do you offer that to men? Like, how do you or how do you experience that in terms of being able to handle, quote unquote, her emotions?
Yeah, I mean, this comes back to self knowledge in the inner game for men. If you don't know how to handle your own emotions as a man, your own inner feminine, then you're never going to be able to handle it outside yourself. So this is where men's work and pretty intense experiences, ceremony, ritual, therapies, things like this are powerful because they actually unlock in you that chaos, the emotional feminine. And it actually doesn't make you feminine as a man. It makes you more masculine because you're coming into more wholeness and balance. And, once for myself, once I did more of this work, intense bioenergetics, trauma release, things like this, men's work, and tapped into that part of me that is an emotional storm and maybe is very young, below age 7, or maybe is based on all these times I didn't show up for myself and actually express emotion in a healthy way, whether it's rage or grief, whatever. Once I've accessed that and gone through it, and like you can feel its power, and like, holy shit, there's a lot of energy there and it can't be controlled, it can't be logicked away. Once you've dealt with that and held yourself in it and self-regulate, suddenly when a woman's in that, you're like, oh, I know what that is, I've seen that. Not that you're going to be in that as much as she is per se, but you know how to be present for it and actually show up to it in a good way. And so the men out there that are like, oh, I don't want to upset the beast because if she cries or she freaks out, like, I'll just give her whatever she wants. And like, that's just a ticking time bomb, because what that energy, that emotional storm in her actually wants is just to be seen in that. So it can fully move up, out, or down and in, and move through the body and move through the tears and move through the voice, whatever it is. And it won't come out that way if it's constantly being deferred, if it's being shut down, if it's being placated, right? Let me just validate to avoid conflict. This is not a great strategy.
Yeah. And then on the receiving end of that is epic shutdown and suppression.
Right.
And then the suppression of the feminine comes into this. This is where I was for a long time. And my feminine was already suppressed. But then when I would play in a relationship to letting it out, it would be quickly shut down, and also met with, what was a line that used to annoy me so much? I used to get, just get it done. Just get it done. Like, stop you whinging, just get it done. And I would be like, ah. But I learned, okay, suppress all that stuff.
Right.
Alpha woman, put on my alpha pants, get shit done. Like, that's literally what I learned. And so it's a gift again from our masculine partner, if they're willing to sit and see it, and also call us forward in those times if it's necessary, if we're losing our heart and we're not opening and we're somewhere else, like, feeling the moment to pull us back in is such a gift. And then it allows the feminine to be seen, which is then tells my nervous system that it's accepted and that it's loved and that it's not less than, but it's beautiful, and that it's met with, like, such love and depth that would sometimes like lead into a deep intimacy as well. And
Right.
I think that's really important, I think, for men to know that surrender that they're looking for doesn't come from like running away from that. It comes from moving toward that.
Exactly. And the rewards are in that practice itself. You don't do this to get something, but if you do this with skill and that presence and the nervous system relax, yeah, everything's going to be better. Going to feel more intimacy, going to feel more connection, going to be more emotionally available, going to have better sex, you're going to have a better harmonious home. So it's just the benefits are so infinite that, yeah, I think if a lot of men understood like what that feels like, about that relaxation and that depth of intimacy, this wouldn't be something that's esoteric, right? Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not, there's no feminine, I'm a man, like the level that people meet this at tells you a lot about, how they've learned survival strategies to avoid or, dance in this energy.
Yeah. How does agility work for you and your relationship then? Like, would you say you have a very strong masculine essence most of the time, or would you say you're closer to it flicking between the two? And how do you manage the agility of both?
Yeah, I would say I'm most comfortable and spend most of my time in a masculine energy. As an entrepreneur, as a coach, as a teacher, I love this stuff, and it drives me. I'm really motivated by it. That being said, I feel fairly confident in my ability to switch gears. And I used to believe that the need to switch and kind of be more receptive more often was a good thing. And I don't know if I believe that anymore for myself, you know, especially in relationship. It's actually like a deeper initiation to the masculine. And the masculine doesn't always look like, you know, like just clear, strong, like quick, confident. Sometimes it's very soft, but it's super strong and subtle and silent. And that energy is something, you know, I'm still working on myself with and understanding it deeper. But there are times where, like, if you can't surrender as a man, if you can't submit, whether that's to an experience, to your own emotion, to your woman, to other men, you're going to have a hard time, and you're going to really create more stress for yourself and really kind of miss out on some of the fruits of that, right? So knowing when to surrender is huge, and that's where that agility definitely comes into play.
Is surrendering for a man different to how a woman would surrender?
I mean, on an essence level, it's the same, but because of the fact that we are different as men and women, it's definitely something that looks different, right? It might just be speaking more, you know. Women tend to have easier access to emotions. For some men, they might not be able to access it simply. So just speaking vulnerably is a start, and that becomes a huge way to surrender. And then, you know, you can get deeper into whatever's in the body, right? It always comes back to the body. Is there energy somewhere? Is there a holding pattern? And where does that emotion want to move? Sometimes it's really up, and there needs to be a lot of, like, you know, energy up. Sometimes it's really down and soft, and it just needs to be, you know, nurtured.
Mm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think that there is also a bit of fear. I think fear around the word surrender, but also the feeling of surrender in both men and women, you know. And I think for different reasons. What do you think, for both men and women, what do you offer for them to take into consideration when it comes to surrendering being a strength and not a weakness?
I mean, the classic example that I'll use is, like, you know, earthquake or disaster resistant buildings. If you build a structure super rigid with no flexibility, if a big earthquake, tsunami, etc., high winds come, it's going to snap like that. There's nothing that can give. And that's the psyche of a man who is afraid of surrender, right? And he learned that from his father and his father, and like these male role models that couldn't surrender.
Mm.
And what happens to those men is addiction, midlife crisis, divorce, suicide. Like, there's just a lot of negativity that comes along with an inability to surrender. And we've been taught this, like, warlike, profiteering idea that, like, never surrender, like win at all costs. But that's a whole different domain. We're talking about the ability to be vulnerable, to receive help, to have a village around you, to have support from men and women, friends and lovers, and whoever else, elders. And so that kind of surrender is real power, because no one's an island and no one can do it alone. As a human, we're social beings. So the idea that surrender is weakness is just blatantly untrue. It's never been true for humanity. And that's kind of a mind virus that's gotten into the collective and done a lot of harm.
Yeah, absolutely. Poof. How do we go about unraveling that? Because some people aren't in relationship, some people by themselves, and I think it takes cultivating deep practice when you're solo as well before you meet
Right.
someone. So what is some practices that, or some things that people can do to really allow themselves to feel safe in the surrender?
Yeah, I mean, it's really find the others. Seek out a group. You don't have to be in a relationship to practice this. If you're a man, be with other men. If you're a woman, be with other women, and then be with, you know, groups that actually celebrate you and not just tolerate you or support negative patterns. And, you know, no matter where you are in the world, people ask me this all the time. It's like, oh, I need to be where that retreat is or this work. It's like, there's nothing around me. It's like, it's not true. There's other people that are seeking it. And, like, yeah, you may be somewhere that it's not present. That just means you might need to be the leader. You might need to create it and really go first. The leader is just the one that goes first. And on the solo work, especially for men tend to isolate more in the modern world. you know have a meditation practice. And meditation isn't just sitting with your eyes closed and thinking good thoughts or something, or oming. Meditation can be a lot of different things: hiking, movement, surfing, some arts, martial arts. It can be a mini multivariate thing, but have a practice, because you got to start cultivating relationship to you. Your relationship to you is what the most important, long lasting relationship you will have as a being. So if you haven't cultivated that, it's going to be really hard to be in community with others and actually receive the nectar, because you haven't actually done it yourself and you're relying on the outside. So again, it's an inside out game, and it takes time. It takes that discipline, consistency. Can you show up again and again and again and again to hold yourself in the good and the bad times?
Yeah. Yeah. Phew. Um, and I think that's really interesting as well, because as a woman, I actually love that. Like, I actually love meditating and going in nature and doing, like, my spiritual self, as I've mentioned a lot of times on the podcast, is quite a masculine essence. And created, it's also created, what I've realized recently is it's created such a strong, almost like a strong figure, or like space for my own feminine to exist in a deeper
Yeah.
way. And I've only lived, like, I was kind of like judging myself for this like strong masculine that I've cultivated and that I love and that I have. But I've realized recently it's allowed me to go deeper into my own feminine by myself, into some really deep dark places, especially around like all the womb wisdom, and be held in that and not need to run or deflect or reach out to, like, get validation or whatever. It's like allowed me just to sit in it more deeply. So I would also really, really recommend that women don't shy away from that stuff too. What's
Right.
your thoughts on that?
I mean, you nailed it. Your inner masculine provides a space for your inner feminine to relax. You
Mm-hmm.
can think about this as, mind and body, mind, heart, emotions, thoughts. There's a lot of dichotomies, but that's it. Like, your spiritual practice is a foundation. It's a structure, a boundary, a magic circle of protection and empowerment that creates a safety for the feminine to feel relaxed and surrendered and juicy.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens inside of you, right? That's not something that can be given to you by a guru or a priest or a teacher. This is something you have to do for yourself, and it's everyone. It's not just men. I think men have, the men I've worked with, that's something that's foreign to them, that they would even have to do that they even have an inner feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think women understand that very well, like you perfectly described.
Yeah. What would you say then for the flip side for a male or man of having his strong masculine that's there and holding space for his feminine to exist, like practicing that? Is that practicing emotion, or what does that look like for a man to get intimate with his feminine so that he can hold a woman in her feminine?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be unique for every man, but it's going to come again to something like an action, a practice. And it can be as simple as self-inquiry, right? Journaling, writing, having a dialogue with yourself. It's a great way for men to start, as an inquiry. Like, what am I feeling right now? When's the first time I felt that? How long have I been feeling that? How old does that feeling feel, that emotion? And you might be shocked at how deep that goes. But it also can be, yeah, like, at first you might need support. You might need to go to someone to hold you in your feminine while you cry or scream or rage, or whatever it is. And that's an intense version, but that's what's called for a lot of people, because it's been pent up for so long. For other people, it'll just be very gentle. Like, a lot of men relate to the feminine, their inner feminine, and the outer through nature. That's how I really got on this path, spending time alone in a forest or a seashore or the mountains. Like, you'll start to delayer those armors and really start to feel strongly. And then once you can feel nature strongly, you just realize it's just you, and those inner emotions and feelings are there. And so any really powerful man has access to both. There's never been a powerful man, even you look at history, right, that didn't have awareness of this, because you're just playing with half a deck. It just doesn't make sense.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's beautiful as well. And then how does it relate to intimacy and sex? Because it still is a thing that will come up for a lot of men of, I just should surrender. And if we've talked about now, like, well, get intimate with your own feminine and work on presence. And when you work on that, and you will evoke the surrender in her. But is there something specific that they can really pay attention to, and keeping in mind that I think it's not the same ever, like it's literally about what she, feeling the moment. But is there something specific that there maybe is missing in when people are saying something like this?
I mean, I think what's missing, when I heard you say that, first thing I thought is like the polarities get flipped. So for a lot of men on their spiritual journey, when they uncover their inner feminine, they just jump into it and they enter chaos and become, you know, maybe they're all in on yoga or plant medicine, or, I certainly went through my phase of this, and it just is like, it's too much. Like they're expressing feelings all the time and they're actually neglecting structure and the masculine presence. And so then the feminine around them, the women are just kind of like, if they're relating, it's like, what's going on here? And then the sexuality will obviously change based on that. So the art and the dance, especially in the bedroom, is like to know when to be strong and the leader, and to be like very penetrating, right? With the intention, mind, thoughts, body. And then to know when to submit and just surrender and let the feminine come to you. And then there's an ebb and flow. But I think keeping that straight, right? Like just because you had a massive breakthrough and like, wow, my inner feminine, like I feel so good. Maybe you don't bring all of that to your woman. That was for you. You don't need to share all of that and be in that around her all the time. And so there's a discrimination here, a discretion that you get to cultivate as well.
Yeah, I really love that. And I work like one-on-one with men. And what I find is that, like, the first time that I did this, I remember like one of my best friends ever. He's very masculine essence, like very masculine, which allows me to fully drop into my feminine. But he would have moments where he needed to be held, like he needed to be held in his feminine, because he was like that. He's like, I don't want to take this home to my partner. He's like, she doesn't need to see this. Like I hold her and her stuff. We don't need to go into all of this emotion. But he loved the fact that I could hold him. I was a feminine being holding a masculine space for him to go into his feminine. Like, it was a beautiful dynamic. And this is when I started to work with men, realizing that more men realize this. They don't want to take their feminine self home to their partner because of polarity, and they want to hold the masculine pole, but they can't, they don't know where to go to be the vulnerable feminine self and to feel safe to do that. And so this is where I've noticed the work is really powerful, be it you're working with a man coach doing men's work, or you're finding someone that you feel safe to do that. It's so key, because what I can see a pattern in with people that will say my feminine, my partner won't surrender, is that often leading up to the part of intimacy, they're being in their feminine, and then all of a sudden they're flipping to this masculine, but the woman hasn't caught on, so she's stuck in her masculine. And then so there's this polarity dynamic that's taking place. So I love that you picked up on that, because I think that's such a key thing. And I think polarity, like for my nervous system, the polarity is going to kick in before we get to the bedroom. Like I'm going to be either turned on or not, before we even enter that. And then if it just comes out of nowhere, it's like we can look at blueprints, we can look at all sorts of things. Like energetics means a lot to me. So if I've been in my masculine, he's been in his feminine, and then all of a sudden it flips straight, like in 30 seconds, like
Right.
and my nervous system isn't going to move as quick as that typically. So I think that's where we can sometimes slip up as well. And why does she not want it? Or why does she not surrender? Where was the polarity sitting 30 seconds ago?
Right. So important, the calibration, right, of the feminine nervous system versus the masculine. I think you nailed it. There's build up, there's lead up, there's a warm up with the female. That's really important. And yeah, I certainly have learned that the hard way. And I think a lot of men, have had to catch on to understanding why that's necessary. Because for the mind, it's like, why do I have to do this? Like, it's just now this is happening. It's like, well, there's a story being told. There's a build up. So I think you nailed it.
How did you get yourself to realize that and to practice that? Because that's another thing. Like, oh, why do I have to do this? Like, why is that, you know?
Right.
And then it's like one of those discipline things that it's like, well, I don't want to do that, so let's just not have sex. Like, you know, it's how did you get yourself to really understand what she needed and to practice that and to kind of, I don't know if you do, but if you find it actually being a joyful experience now or something that you love to do, opposed to something like, oh, I've got to do that thing again.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all the time. I still have my resistance for sure, but it's understand like once you've done it once and you feel how good it feels and like how much power and just intimacy comes from it, you get why it's important as a man. And so for all men, you know, I'm an experimentalist and empiricist as much as a mystic. You have to do the experiment. So if you've never done this, if you've never been sensitive to the energetics like this, do it once, see what happens. Was the sex good? Was the intimacy real? Was it powerful? Did you feel dominant and confident as a man? Did she feel submissive and surrendered as a woman and juicy? Wow, I wonder why. Let's look at the data. You know, you got to appeal to the male logic, and that's how I've, you know, self-hypnotized myself / practiced that art. And a lot of men, again, learned these things from porn, so they have no idea about how this looks and how this works. And that's where, you know, the tantric arts and philosophies are really useful because they actually initiate you into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And again, like I think polarity is key. Like if there's somebody who's holding space in the masculine for a lot of the day and I'm feeling so in my feminine, then sure, like it's easier to slap me up against the wall and be, you know, have a whole different experience as it if the polarity wasn't there and you needed to gently, you know, be in that agility pattern of changing that, of then
Right.
taking the woman out of her masculine into the feminine, and that's going to be a slow process. So I think polarity is such a key thing depending on when that's kicked in and what's going on.
Right. And it's like the nuance again, and with high presence, you'll know the nuance, you'll know the timing, you'll place it perfectly because you're aware and you're paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is your, when did you start to trust yourself more? Like trust your awareness and trust your, that you can feel what is needed in the moment.
I mean, from dating, you know, and with my own life, not even in dating so much, but you know, business is the perfect way you see this as well. You know, is the client surrendering? Are they submitting? So something coaching taught me, and also facilitating, doing workshops and retreats. You know, because those people's feminine can surrender to your masculine, and starting to understand that. Yeah, if you can do it once, you can do it again. Okay, what happened here? What did I mess up? You know, it's a lot of trial and error. I think for a lot of men, certainly was for me. And my path was, you know, doing it again and facing the fear and resistance and doing it again and doing it again. And then starting to become unconsciously competent at it because I didn't need to focus on the details. I can just trust my instinct. And that's the ultimate power. So you don't have to come from a contrived model. And the only way you'll get there, right, is failing 100 times, right?
Yeah.
Just rush to fail 100 times. Nobody really cares about you failing but you. So it's like you got to get over you. You know, it's you versus you, especially with the masculine mind.
Yeah, course correct. Oh, awesome. I love this so much. I've loved this conversation. And I know you share so much more of this juice with everything that you share on social and your podcast. So where can people go to find out and to listen and to be a part of your community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited. My podcast is back online. I had a hiatus. Episode 50 just came out. It's The Revolution, R's in parentheses. That's on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere you get podcasts. So that's going to be pumping. And then, yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, just my name, Kevin Orosz. And I'm really excited about my online course I just launched last month, flowstatemastery.com. And it's all about a lot of the things we've been talking about. It's for men and women, but I think, you know, men will benefit a lot from the discipline here. Flow practices, flow triggers. You know, I go into meditation, breath work, fitness, diet, fasting, biohacking, like supplementation, plus the tantric principles that I use in morning routines, evening routines with partners in business to just be your best self, be the confident, collected, and powerful presence in the world, right? Whatever your job is, whatever relationship status you have. So I'm really excited for that. And yeah, just more and more students are joining that, and I'm really excited for the work out there I see that is just blossoming with men's work. And I think the feminine work is been strong in the conscious community, which is certainly a bubble, but I think the men's work is powering up in the last few years, and it's only growing. So I've been really blessed to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there. And I'm supporting that in every way possible because I know it's so needed and so valuable. So, however I can support that, I will do so. And I really appreciate you and the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing today. Is there any last final words you want to share, last message to kind of wrap up what we've spoken about today?
Yeah, I really appreciate you, Sam, for having me. Honored to be here. And yeah, what I want to say to all the listeners, especially the men, um, is really that the world needs you. You're needed. And if you're not enthusiastic and you don't have a strong sense of purpose, then you don't need to ask yourself, what do I do next? What do I do? I don't know what to do. That's what you need to do. You need to find something to care about. You need to find a mission, because the world doesn't need you. You are not, just a sideline spectator. We need you on the field. We need all hands on deck as we go into 2020, and the planet is changing and shaking all around you. So you just need to open your eyes.
Yeah. Oh, like so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Sam. Bless.